Well, hello, everybody. I'm Ed Parco of Helping the Brave. And today we have a special guest, and we're going to bring him in from the green room, Lord Tim Heale. Correct? Did I get that right?
You did.
All right.
He ale, you could do it as his beer as an acronym.
I'm sorry.
His beer, he
His beer.
ale.
Oh, gotcha. That English humor is really amazing.
Yes, lots of Americans don't get it. In
Yeah, I
fact,
wonder
lots of
why.
civvies don't get military humour.
Yeah, and just so people know, I've been with Podmatch probably for 2 years, and I've been doing it for a bunch of my other shows that I have, and this is the first time I reached out to them for veterans, and I'm surprised how many veterans are on there, and I was just, I didn't. I've dealt with a few different people from England and other places, and it's unique to have a veteran who's not from an American service on to have a different total story about what they've done and how their service was. And so thank you so
Mhm.
much for being here today to talk about that.
No, it's my pleasure.
So did you come from a military family?
Yeah, kind of. I was born in sort of the back end of the 50s. Um, my old man was in the army during the Second World War. He's just I mean, he just old enough at the time, but lots of my uncles were in the military. So it kind of moved on from there. My great granddad was in the Royal Navy. My great great granddad was in the Royal Navy. So, yeah, we've got a little bit of a military tradition in the family.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry, we'll get that humor down here real quick. All right. So why did you join and what service did you go into? Because I don't know the services of
I joined the
the
British Army.
okay.
So,
And is out of so in USA you have Navy, the Marines, which is a department of the Navy. Then you have the Air Force, which came out of the Army, and the Army is the largest service out there. Is that kind of how it is over there?
yeah, pretty much exactly the same. Um, Royal Marines get the ump when you say that they're actually the Navy. But if you look at their ID cards, it says Royal Navy on there. It doesn't say
Right.
Royal Marines.
Yeah. Ours says Department of the Navy. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. It's how it worked out exactly the same. But all right. So you
Yeah,
chose the Army. Was
yeah.
that what you're and was why'd you pick the Army?
Well, it's funny because as I grew up, I was actually going to go into farming, and over here at the age of 10, you take what they call used to call the 11 plus, which is a test to see whether you can go to grammar school or whether you go to you're not bright enough, you go to one of the other schools. I wasn't bright enough. I failed the 11 plus fairly miserably. But
So
I had this plan to go to an agricultural boarding school. And to get into that, you needed to take a test. And I managed to fail that miserably as well. So,
so there's
so
no
at the
test
age,
to get in the Army?
well, yeah, and that's a funny story again. So at the age of 10, I decided that's it, I'll go and join the army instead. So move along a couple of years at 14 and three quarters is the first time you can apply to join the British Army. So 14 and three quarters, I went along to the recruiting office. Recruiting sergeant sat us down, gave us a test, got the results of the test, failed that miserably. He said, son, if you can't learn to read and write proper like what I does, you can't join the army. Suggest you go and sort yourself out. Cool. That was a bit of a shock. So the following week, or that weekend, I gave myself a really good talking to. Went to school the following week, went to every single lesson. Half of the teachers had never seen me before and thought I was a new student. So I knuckled down and worked really hard for 6 months. Went back with a mate. Recruiting sergeant remembers me. He says, "Oh, I remember you. Have you done some learning?" I have. So we sat down. My mate was in the same room doing the same test. Sergeant says, "I've got to nip out to do some bits and pieces. I'll be back in time for you to finish the test." So my mate gave us some of the answers, passed, and I got a place as a junior soldier in the depot, depot, the Queen's Division, as a junior soldier in the Royal Anglian Regiment. So at the age of 16, I joined the British Army, and never really looked back much.
What year was that?
That was 1974 when I joined the army.
So it was right after Vietnam, all those other things.
Yeah, so I mean, we weren't really involved in Vietnam in the later stages. We were initially when the French was in there. We had a little bit to do with Vietnam, but we'd only just come out of Korea. So yeah, we had
No, I remember Korea.
those going on. So my first operational tour was Northern Ireland, and that was 1977. And yeah, it was a rough tour.
Yeah, and you were in 44 years. Is that what I remember you saying? Wow.
Yeah, I did 44 years under the colours. I did the first 11 years, and my wife at the time didn't want to go back out to Germany. So, and I didn't want to go out there without her. So I decided to leave the army, which on reflection was probably a bad choice. I should have gone. Anyway, so I came out into Civvy Street. I struggled. I really struggled with civilian work ethics and mentality. They just don't have it.
Right. They don't.
They don't.
Attention to detail is not it. That's not what they've learned. Any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they don't really care about the job. They don't care about getting the job done. And I struggled with that. So I did that for a few years. At the same time, I joined when I came out, I went into our territorial army, a bit like your National Guard, I guess. So I went into what was our Special Air Service as a reserve. Did that for a year, and on an exercise, one of the final exercises, I broke my leg. That was it. That career came to an end. So I had to go back out into the civilian world and earn a living for a bit.
All right. So what did you do in the civilian world? I mean, what was your, so we have different MOSs. What did you do when you first got in the army?
I was an infantry soldier.
Okay.
So a PBI.
I know what that is. Yeah.
Poor bloody infantry.
Yeah.
Foot slogger. So that was my MOI. And I was a GPMG gunner. And then I moved on to the Wombat, the 120 millimeter anti-tank gun. So I ended up in the anti-tank platoon for a bit.
Can you hear today?
Say again?
Do you have good hearing?
No. I have hearing aids.
Okay. All right.
So I'm a bit Mutt and Jeff. So
no, I just said,
I don't
care. Yeah. There wasn't, the ear protection back then was not what it is today, and even today it's not as good as it needs to be. Yeah.
Well, I'm lucky still to have hair as well, because when you fire a Wombat, and it's a 120 millimeter shell, and you get old ammunition that you have to get rid of, and you get what they call a blowback, and you get all this, the flames come out the back of the Ventura, and anybody that's the guys that's on the number 1, number 2, they either get their eyebrows all singed off or the back of the head singed off, depending on which position you was in.
Wow. And then how long did you do that for? I mean, we got 44 years to go over, so come on. How long?
Yeah. So we move on a bit. So when I left the army, the job I did a bit of truck driving. So I was driving a truck for a bit, and I picked up a job doing some international work. So I was doing lots of Europe, and I did that for about 4 years, and then I got a job working for a Norwegian out of Norway, doing a line truck. So we was doing from Oslo to Paris to Oslo, and doing a trip, maybe 2 trips a week if you're lucky, if you got the timing right. Then I got sick of that. I was actually sick. I was smoking about 600 or about 60 to 80 cigarettes a day,
Wow.
drinking about 3 litres of filter coffee a day. Yeah, it wasn't good for your health. So I came back after 18 months and I didn't go back. And I went back onto the agency, did a little bit more driving, and then they put me into an office job. And I was working for British Telecom in a corporate client service centre. And one of the guys in there was in the TA. And he said, well, why don't you come and join the TA with me?
What's a TA?
That's a territorial army. It's a bit like your National Guard. So I went across,
I just
joined
want to make
them.
so whenever there's acronyms, I want to explain them so people, because not only
Yeah,
just soldiers and people who've
yeah,
been on, in the military watch this, but other people watch it, and I want them to understand what we're talking about.
yeah. So that was our reserve army.
Okay.
So I joined that and did that for a bit, and then a couple of 3 years into that, I transferred across to a new unit which was called 15 UK Psychological Operations Group, and that was actually based on what was an old American Air Force base here in England, just outside of Bedford, a place called Chicksands, which was a American listening station, I think. I think that's what it was. So I joined them, and when I got recruited onto there, the boss, he said, would I be prepared to deploy out on an operational tour if the need arose? Yeah, of course I would, no problem at all. 6 months later, I found myself going to Kosovo. So I did 2 tours of Kosovo back to back. So I spent almost a year in Kosovo. The following year, in 2001, I deployed out to Macedonia on that operation called Task Force Harvest. During that, 9/11 happened. 5 months later, I found myself flying into Kabul. And that's where I did the first tour of Kabul, or first tour of Afghan in 2002. Then I did an Iraq tour in 2003-04, and then I did 2 further tours of Afghanistan in 5-6 and then 8-9.
Wow.
So yeah, my last tour was the best in Afghanistan from 8-9. I spent 6 months bouncing around Helmand, installing radio in a box and servicing it and training guys up on how to operate a radio in a box, which essentially is an FM radio transmitter in a case with a media player on it, attached to a laptop with a couple of mics. And I was training up interpreters to be radio presenters, and the guys that were looking after the interpreters, training them up to be radio producers. And I had a great time.
Okay. Why were they doing, when you say radio producers, is it like being on the radio? I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it's not just commercial radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so teaching them how to put a radio wheel together, so where to put in your ads, where to put in your news.
How did you learn this?
It was part of the PSYOPs job that I was doing. Early on, I got transferred from the print section into the radio section, and
you just say PSYOPs, correct?
Yeah, psychological operations,
yeah.
PSYOPs. So we did a bit of work with FORPOG out of Fort Bragg, and actually we did quite a lot of work with other nations. So in NATO, so I worked with Poles, Romanians. When I was in Kosovo, we actually did a little bit of work with the Russians, the French, the Spanish, the Italians, Germans. Yeah, we had a really good relationship in the psyops community. So as part of all of that, my training was over on the radio section, and I did several courses in radio and picked up all of those skill sets. So by the
And
time I went out in 2008 and 9, I was passing those skills on as we were rolling out this this radio network across Helmand.
what was the purpose of setting up the radio network? Just so
It's to influence local population. It's to give information out on what we were doing. It was about hearts and minds. It was about changing attitudes and behaviours towards the coalition. Basically, it was
it's kind of like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize. I was just thinking of a lot of us watched MASH, the show here in America during, that we watched, and in there they'd
Yeah.
have the lady who'd come on and say stuff about the Americans and
Oh
through
yeah.
and that's basically what it's to help with morale or get rid of morale, right? Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, well, for us, it was everything that I did was directed at the local Afghan population. So it's understanding the mentality, the mindset, the culture of the local Pashtun, predominantly Pashtun Afghans. So it's having a very detailed knowledge of the target audience, B, what influences they're susceptible to, and what we could do to get them to change their opinion and to come round to our way of thinking. So it was a crucial job. It was a force multiplier, and we did an awful lot of good. So yeah, it was a very, very important, vital job that we were doing out there at the time.
And I don't think
had a lot of success.
I don't think many people understand that. They know that we went in some of these areas and we helped rebuild them, right? And then as soon as any force leaves, then the Taliban comes in and destroys everything, takes it away from them again. So, I mean, you went there multiple times to the sand, and you said the last one was your best. What, all those different years and all the different things, what was the major difference going over there? Do you understand the question? Because you went there multiple times.
The difference
Did you see a major change
saw,
one way or another? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the two tours I did in Helmand province, I saw a lot of changes. I mean, the early days when we went down in 2005-6, where I was going out on some patrols, talking to locals. It was a shooting war. I mean, the Taliban would take us on in a shootout, and more often than not, we stuffed them. They changed their MO sort of in 2007, really, was it really changed. So when I went back out in 2008-9, it was a vastly more dangerous place because of the IED threat. Although they really tightened up and frowned upon any sort of military tourism, whereas the earlier days people would sort of jump on the back of a patrol just to say they'd been out on the ground. That had completely stopped when I went back out there, and I only went out on the ground in 6 months 4 times, actually 4 times on patrols where I had to go out to get some sort of information or some task that I had to do. And 2 of those times we were hit with IEDs and people died. That was pretty tough. That's why they frowned upon people going out when they didn't need to.
No sense putting yourself at risk when you don't need to.
Absolutely not.
Were you fluent in the language while you were there? Or did
No,
you
I picked
rely
up a bit of it. I mean, the greetings and stuff like that. Thank you, that sort of thing. But we had interpreters, and you have to trust the buggers.
I in America, I do mortgage loans, and I helped out a guy who was one of our interpreters. He got American citizenship. Then he joined the military and then came back afterwards and got out and stayed in America. And it's just amazing that we did help out a lot of interpreters, but then we also left a bunch of them this last time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a story about that. The three
Please.
of the guys that work for me got left behind. And fortunately, with a lot of hard work, a lot of communications, using my local member of parliament, we've managed to get three of these guys out with the families. They were actually being sought by the Taliban.
And this was when we pulled out of Afghanistan.
They came out after, so that they missed. One of the guys was caught up in that last flight with the bomb, so he missed his flight. The other two guys also missed it, but they weren't caught in the bomb. But they were waiting to get called forward, so they missed the last flight out, and then they had to go into hiding. And I was communicating with them throughout this period, and it took us 18 months to get them out.
From a non-American point of view, how do you think of us as America right now?
I don't have a problem with the Americans. I have a problem with Biden for the way that he did it.
Okay, that's what I'm talking. Yeah.
And didn't give the Brits the opportunity to get some more NATO assistance before they pulled the plug. Had they give us a little bit more time, the Americans only had about 2,500 troops in there when he pulled them out.
Right.
They just had some air support in there.
But we left all of our vehicles. We left everything.
Yeah. Just dumped everything and hightailed it out, allowing the Taliban to come back in.
Right.
And that really does grip. Really, I'm really still angry about that.
And how does the English people feel about that? I mean, they feel the same way. The soldiers feel the same way that you feel about how we pulled out.
Yeah,
because we all feel that way. I have Afghanistan people who are committing suicide because they're like, "What the hell did I do? Spend all this time there for and help all these people?" And I just wanted to see a different point of view, because we're totally upset going, okay, this is 1970s all over again when Carter pulled out of Vietnam the same way.
Yeah, and left it open to the at that time, I guess it was communist.
BC.
This time it's Taliban.
Right. It's the
and
same
the people
thing.
that I really, really, really feel sorry for is the girls that in Afghan. They had the best part of 20 years. Girls that are born in those 20 years have had that certain amount of freedom to be able to go to school and all the rest of it. Now they can't even leave at home. That makes me so angry the way that happened.
And it didn't have
to. So no, it was totally unnecessarily.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Yeah. But I mean, that the problem is that's not how we normally, I mean, I can't say normally leave, but because it just seems like certain presidents, if you go back in time, 70s and current, they're the ones who pull out wrong. And it's like, okay, get everybody out first, then vehicles and military, everybody leaves at the same time. Don't do what you just did. Everybody leave. And that's just too bad, because we fought so long to do so much good, and then you just let them back in.
Yeah, I saw a lot of changes over the sort of the 9 years that I'd been in and out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, I interviewed another guy from your area. He was in undercover in the Taliban, in one of the prisons, and great conversation. Said the same thing. He went back in after that, and he was helping to get everybody out he possibly could help to get out. And I know a lot of other people who did. We just need to do better at it. All right, so 44 years, you did a lot. What are you doing
My
now?
last 8 years, I came back in 2009, and I changed jobs, and I went as a welfare officer for London Central Garrison. So I was looking after, at that time, the Queen's Guards. So looking after their mental well-being, looking after their welfare needs, looking after their housing. Did an awful lot of adventurous training for the guys. Got guys going skiing, sailing, climbing, mountain biking, all sorts of stuff. So I had 8 fantastic years in London, just before I retired. And then I retired in 2018, having sort of served in the British Army under the colours for 44 years. So
That must have been a little different getting out after 44 years. I know you had a little break here and there, but
well, I actually got paid every single year for 44 years.
okay.
When I did came out, I was on what they call regular reserve. So you have to go back at least once a year to do a bit of training, get paid, and then just to keep your skills and your drills up, just in case of being called up. So
Right. Well, that was like America. They scaled the service down from 2008. You know, when Obama administration was.
yeah,
I'm not picking on any. I'm just making a statement. They said, okay, we're going to go to reserves and have the reserve population. Everybody's like, I'm joining the reserve. They'll never call us up, and all those people went to war.
yeah,
You know, and yeah, it was a great idea, but I just
yeah,
I don't. I know we all help the world a lot. Do you think it's each? All right, so there's been, when Trump was president, he was all about America first,
yeah.
and
He's the only American president you've had for a long time that hasn't taken you to any sort of war.
yeah, it's because
Mind you, he did instigate coming out of Afghan.
yeah, but he wasn't there anymore, so
No, but
yeah,
he sort of started the ball, didn't he?
yeah, but it was to start the ball to leave, but not just
Yeah,
drop
but not the
everything
way it
and drop
happened.
your pants
Yeah,
and run.
yeah,
Do it right, and nobody, and
absolutely.
he just, unfortunately, our president Biden wanted to say, I took, this is the date and we're out that date, period. That's not how you do things,
No,
yeah.
no. You have a gentle withdrawal. Make sure that things are in place where you don't leave the place wide open for the enemy to come back in and stuff you.
All right, looking back at your 44-year career, is there anything you would have done differently?
Probably not left that first time. Probably would have gone to Germany
Yeah,
because
but you don't know if you would have ended in
that,
the same career the same way.
yeah, it might have been totally different.
Yeah, yeah.
But there you go. The battalion was earmarked to be in Germany for at least 5 years at that stage.
How is
Well, the
the retirement?
best tour I've had was Berlin.
Oh,
We got posted to Berlin in
what year?
1978,
Okay,
1978 to 80. What a brilliant tour that was.
when did the wall come down? 80.
89, so
Well,
long before the war.
yeah, you were on the
Yeah,
other side.
yeah. I mean, we had such a good time in Berlin. Spent quite a bit of time in East Berlin. Yeah,
Yeah,
had a good time in America, in Berlin.
really.
And then we came out of there and we went to Northern Ireland for 2 years. Thanks.
Doesn't sound like that was a great place. All right, so you were in for
No.
44 years. You retire. How's the retirement
Yeah.
pay over in England? Is it
Well,
good?
quite funny. I retired at 60, but just prior to retiring, I broke. I ended up in hospital for about 6 weeks. And when I went for my release medical, because I'd done a lot of work with the doctor anyway on unit health committee meetings and stuff like that, knew her really well. And we sat down. She says, "It's a good job you're leaving, because if you weren't, you would be."
So after that period of time, and you're in probably in your 60s now. I don't know your age.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything else, or are you just reading all those
Well,
books behind you?
nowadays, I started. I guess I started about the same time as you doing podcasts.
Mhm.
We got into sort of lockdown, and I was drinking far too much spiced rum. I think thinking to myself, I need to do something else. I'm just going to drink myself into a stupor all every time. So I started doing a podcast, and I started to tell my life story. So I did 24 half-an-hour episodes of my life. So if you've got any listeners out there that suffer from insomnia, it's something good to listen to, put you to sleep. Got to the end of that, and I thought, what do I do now? So I did about 3 or 4 different episodes of slightly in-depth stuff that I'd done. Got to the end of that, I thought, why don't I tell other people's stories? So I started doing other people's stories, and I've done several hundred now.
Well,
And
yeah, I got into it from radio. I was asked to do a radio show in 2018 to start one for real estate and finance. And then I was like, okay, how do I take it from these 51,000 to 71,000 listeners over here and get in a different market? And people are like, well, there's been podcasts. So I created it, turned it into a podcast and uploaded it on Monday. And that's how I got into podcasting. And then I wanted to do something totally different than my industry. And I started Inner Edison podcast, which has to do with your greatest accomplishments come from your greatest defeats. It's really focused for entrepreneurship. And then I'm like, I want to give back. When I got out of the service, I ran the hell away from being a veteran. I didn't want anything to do with it at the time. And then I came back to it 15 years later. I when I got out, it was different. It was totally different than it was after 9/11. After 9/11, the country came together again and wanted to support us again as veterans. And I can't say this administration has currently, but the past one was really good for us.
Yeah, ours is pretty much up and down because we're not war fighting at the moment. Nobody cares about us, and I think you're the same because we're not into a war fighting situation anywhere. Nobody really cares about the military. Governments don't really care about it. All they care about is cutting its budget. I mean, we're cut to the bone at the moment. Our military, it's crazy situation that we're in.
Yeah, I just don't think people understand what, people don't look at history. You got to go back and look at history because if you do that, it just messes up everything. We don't really want. I'm going.
Yeah. Say they don't learn from history.
Right.
But I don't know why they don't learn from history. They keep trying to change history, but they don't learn from it. You can't change it. You can only learn from it. And if you don't learn from it, you make the same mistakes again and again and again.
So in the United States, there was a big push to take down all these statues of slave owners and all this stuff out of the White House, right? You're laughing because you know where I'm going. But the problem is it was Democratic Party and the slave owner was a Democratic person and they wanted to whitewash everything so they couldn't tell. And they would say, oh, yeah, that person was a Democrat. The Democratic Party was the slave party of the United States. And it's so funny that so many people are in that party and don't understand history. The history of the Democratic Party all the way up to 1960s, they were stopping the civil rights movement. And they still have the highest Black and Hispanic, what I mean? And it's like, go back in history. Yeah. They can. Yeah.
Oh, we've had similar over here. There's some real woke nutters going around that want to take statues down and deny what our history's been or try and change it.
The statues are there for you to remember what we did wrong so we don't repeat it. If you take that down, you're going to repeat it again. And that's why it's so important to have that there. They're so important to have certain things so we remember because and they want it to be a different way. We have so much. The service today, my son's in the Army today. And the service that he's in is not the service I was in. And the service I was in was not the service that my dad and my uncle and my grandfather and all those people were in. It's changed drastically worse as it got along, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think as is the same. It certainly changed in the 44 years from when I started to when I finished. And you just had to adapt and overcome and be flexible to go with it, or you just drive you crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in, I was, it was all about, you're told what to do, and you just did it. And then it got to a point. Now it's an army of individuals, not an army of one.
Yeah. I think for us, I mean, you could see where it would start to go wrong when they came along with what they call slam accommodation, which is single living accommodation. For particularly infantry soldiers, it doesn't work. When I started out, it was in a barrack block for 20 guys, and that was like quite a lot of my history. Or you went down to 4-man rooms when you got to a battalion and stuff like that, but you always had multiple occupancy rooms, so you always had that camaraderie. They changed it some years ago where they thought it was a good idea to put guys into single living accommodation with their own ablutions and everything like that, so self-contained units. What happens is when they finish work, they go off to the scratcher, shut the door, you don't see them till the morning, so you don't know what's going on in there, and that's not good for unit cohesion.
And it's also not good for people dealing with things. They hide things and they don't deal with it.
Absolutely.
Because we lose 22 veterans a day plus one active duty member. And my son he went in and he got to his first duty station as the pandemic hit. And so they locked him up in barracks, and there was kids committing suicide. And we thought, we're almost going to lose him because of some stuff, but we were able to get some people connected and get, because of this the podcast that I do. And it was, it helped out him a lot. And that's why I do what I do. And if you're coming to America, April 12th or 13th, we're doing a fire walk for veterans. So if you fly all over, we'll let you walk on fire.
Is that with Dave Alban?
Yes. You know, Dave. Yeah.
I know Dave. I interviewed Dave on the podcast.
Yeah. He did 170 podcasts in a year or something like that.
Yeah, I know. I was one of them.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I had him on one of my podcasts, and I'm a veteran. I wanted to put that on. And so I'm the guy that's putting that on here locally in Modesto, California. So,
wow. Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you. It's happening. Whether or not I want it, it's happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do a live show most Wednesday evenings just for an hour between, it's UK time from 7 till sort of past, maybe a bit longer, all about mental well-being, taking the stigma out of mental health. I try and get lots of veterans on. We talk about lots of different issues. We talked about veteran suicide in general. We've looked at bereavement. We've looked at addictions, and I get guests on, and we talk about all aspects of mental well-being, and that's an important show that we do.
Yeah. Well, what's the name of your show?
It's everyday conversations regarding mental health, or you just look up Tim Heale 9. You'll find the YouTube channel, and just click on there. There's lots of different stuff on there, but you'll find the everyday conversations.
I'll have to check it out. Tim, thanks for coming on the show today. Really appreciate having you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And if you ever need a guest for that, let me know. I just don't know what the time difference is. What time is it there right now?
It's just after 10 o'clock. So,
PM?
Yeah.
So you're 8 hours ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take off 4 hours. That's the time, or 3 hours. Yeah, take off 3 hours to your time.
No, I'm 2 p.m. right now.
Yeah, so that would be about 11 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
Okay, gotcha. All right, Lord Tim Heale, thank you so much for coming on, helping the brave. Thanks for telling us your story. It was nice to getting to know you, and everybody go check out his podcast. Again, what was the name of that? What's the shorter name of that? Is there a shorter name?
Yeah, Tim Heale 9.
There you go. Go to Tim Heale 9. Check it out.
That's me as a scrum half.
That's HEALE. All right, yep. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate having you. And again, make it a great day.
Thanks, Ed.